In the vast expanse of the galaxy, where 1,000 species have learned the art of survival through calculated abandonment, there exists one peculiar trait that marks humanity as fundamentally different and fundamentally dangerous. While others cut their losses and retreat, humans possess an almost pathological inability to leave their own behind. This is not nobility. This is not heroism. This is something far more terrifying to those who would stand against them. The Galactic Council learned this the hard way when they made one critical error in their assessment of human nature. They believed that, like every other civilized species, humans would eventually choose the logical path when faced with impossible odds. They thought humans would weigh the cost and walk away when the math didn't add up. They were catastrophically wrong. What follows is the account of how a single human's refusal to abandon a fallen comrade didn't just save one life, it redefined what the galaxy thought it knew about the species that calls itself humanity. This is the story of why, in the darkest corners of space where predators hunt and empires fall, there's one phrase that now strikes fear into the hearts of those who prey upon the innocent: the humans are coming back for her. And they always do. The evacuation alarm screamed through the corridors of Research Station Kepler 442b like a dying animal. Dr. Sarah Chen pressed her back against the cold metal wall, listening to the thunderous footsteps of her colleagues as they rushed toward the emergency shuttles. The station shuddered under another impact, sending loose equipment crashing to the floor. "Sarah!" Commander Torres's voice crackled through her comm unit. "Where are you? Last shuttle leaves in 3 minutes." She looked down at the sealed laboratory door in front of her, where Dr. Ilara Voss, the brilliant Altarian xenobiologist who had become more than just a research partner over the past 2 years, lay unconscious behind a wall of twisted metal and sparking electronics. The laboratory's emergency lockdown had triggered when debris from the Krillian attack had torn through the station's outer hull. The door's bioscanner flickered weakly, showing Ilara's life signs as faint but stable. "I need more time," Sarah spoke into her calm. "Ilara's trapped in Lab 7. The lockdown protocol won't lift for another 40 minutes. Static filled the channel before Torres responded. "Sarah, listen to me carefully. The Krillians are moving to board the station. Our defense grid is down. We have maybe 2 minutes before they breach the main hull. You need to get to the shuttle now." Sarah's fingers traced over the emergency override panel. The Altarian biolocks were sophisticated, designed to protect their research from contamination or theft. Even with her security clearance, overriding them would take time they didn't have. Through the thick transparisteel window, she could see Ilara slumped against her workstation, a thin line of blue blood so different from human red trickling from a gash on her forehead. The station rocked again, harder this time. Emergency lighting bathed everything in an angry orange glow. Sarah could hear the distinctive whine of Krillian energy weapons getting closer. "Shun! Are you listening to me?" Torres's voice had taken on the sharp edge of command authority. "The Galactic Council has designated this as a total loss. We're authorized to evacuate essential personnel only. Dr. Voss, her biosignature is weak. Even if we could reach her, the medical bay is compromised. She wouldn't survive the journey to the nearest Altarian medical facility." Sarah's jaw tightened. She'd heard this logic before, had seen it applied countless times across the galaxy. When resources were limited and time was short, you saved who you could save. It was pragmatic. It was sensible. It was the way every civilized species operated when faced with impossible choices. It was also completely unacceptable. "Negative, Commander. I'm not leaving without her." The silence that followed stretched for several heartbeats. When Torres spoke again, his voice carried a mixture of admiration and exasperation that Sarah had come to recognize as the standard response to human stubbornness. "Sarah, be reasonable. You're talking about risking 2 lives for someone who might already be dying. The Krillians don't take prisoners, you know what they do to captured researchers. And, even if by some miracle you could get her out, where would you go? The nearest friendly system is 6 jumps away." Through her earpiece, Sarah could hear the shuttle engines spinning up. The vibration traveled through the station's superstructure, a low rumble that seemed to emanate from her bones. She pulled up the station's schematic on her portable display, highlighting the route from Lab 7 to the emergency escape pods. It would take her through 3 sections that were already showing hull breaches, past 2 areas where Krillian boarding pods had attached themselves to the station's outer ring. "I'm sending my shuttle access codes to your personal file," she said, fingers dancing across her tablet. "Tell my sister that I'll see her when this is over." "Goddammit, Sarah," she switched off the comm unit and clipped it to her belt. The corridor behind her had fallen silent except for the distant sound of the shuttle bay doors opening and the last human ship departing Kepler station. She was alone now, surrounded by the groaning metal of a dying station and the approaching footsteps of an enemy that saw human life as nothing more than raw material for their bio-enhancement programs. Sarah pulled out her emergency toolkit and connected it to the lab door's override panel. The Altarian lock system was complex, but she'd spent enough time working alongside Ilara to understand the basic principles. Where a human would use brute force algorithms to break the encryption, the Altarians favored elegant mathematical progressions that unfolded like musical compositions. The first sequence began to unravel under her ministrations. 7 minutes down, 33 to go. Behind her, she heard the distinctive hiss snap of a Krillian breach charge detonating. They were inside the station now, probably moving methodically through each section, cataloging anything useful before they stripped the place for parts. The Krillians were efficient that way, they left nothing behind that could be repurposed, recycled, or consumed. Ilara stirred behind the transparisteel, her large violet eyes fluttering open. The Altarian sat up slowly, one slender hand pressed to her injured forehead. When she saw Sarah working at the door panel, confusion flickered across her delicate features. "Sarah?" Ilara's voice was barely audible through the door's communication system. "The evacuation alarm, why are you still here? Where is everyone?" "Gone," Sarah said without looking up from her work. The second encryption layer was proving stubborn, its mathematical patterns more complex than she'd anticipated. "Station's been abandoned. Krillians are aboard." Ilara's breath caught. "Then, you must leave. Immediately. The escape pods not going anywhere without you." Sarah's fingers never paused in their work. Another sequence unlocked, revealing the third layer underneath. "How's your head? Can you walk?" "Sarah, you don't understand." Ilara pressed both hands against the transparisteel, her violet eyes wide with something that might have been terror or awe. "My people, when we calculate survival probabilities, when we determine resource allocation, we accept that some must be sacrificed for the greater good. It is logical. It is necessary. But, you humans." A new sound echoed through the corridor, heavy footsteps in perfect synchronized rhythm. Krillian search teams moved in formation, clearing each section with military precision. Sarah estimated she had maybe 10 minutes before they reached this part of the station. "You should have left me," Ilara continued, her voice breaking slightly. "By any reasonable calculation, attempting this rescue reduces your own survival probability to nearly zero. No rational being would make this choice." Sarah looked up from the lock panel long enough to meet Ilara's gaze through the window. "Well, lucky for you, nobody's ever accused humans of being rational." The third encryption layer dissolved under her assault, but the fourth was unlike anything she'd seen before. The mathematical progression seemed to shift and adapt even as she worked to decode it, as if the lock itself was learning from her attempts to break it. "Ilara, I need your help with this. The lock's pattern recognition is too advanced for me to crack alone." The Altarian scientist pulled herself to her feet, swaying slightly. "Sarah, even if you free me, where can we go? The shuttles are gone. The escape pods in this section were destroyed in the initial attack. Then, we make our own way out." Sarah's voice carried a grim determination that seemed to puzzle and fascinate the alien scientist. "There's an old maintenance shuttle in Bay 7. It's not rated for long-distance travel, but it might get us to the asteroid mining facility in the next system. The probability of successfully navigating 6 jump points in an unshielded maintenance craft is I don't want to hear about probabilities." Sarah's hands moved frantically over the control panel as the sound of Krillian boots grew closer. "I've seen humans do impossible things before when someone they care about is in danger. We don't calculate odds, we just keep fighting until we win or die trying. The fourth encryption layer finally yielded, revealing the core lock mechanism beneath. This was the critical moment. One wrong input and the entire system would lock down permanently, sealing Ilara inside the lab until the Krillians decided what to do with her. Ilara placed her hands against her side of the door panel, accessing the lock's internal interface. The pattern is based on the mathematical constant pi, but expressed in base 12 notation with recursive modifiers. If we work together. Her fingers moved in graceful arcs across the holographic interface while Sarah input the corresponding sequences on the external panel. The lock's patterns began to align, its defenses recognizing the dual authorization from both sides of the barrier. Sarah, Ilara said quietly as the final sequence unlocked, "Why are you doing this?" "I have studied human psychology, but I do not understand." "You gain nothing from this action except increased danger to yourself." The door hissed open, and Sarah stepped into the lab, grabbing Ilara's emergency medical kit from the wall dispenser. "Because you're my friend. Because leaving you behind would be wrong. Because that's what humans do, we don't abandon our own, no matter what the cost." Ilara stared at her for a long moment, something unreadable in her violet eyes. "Your species terrifies the Galactic Council, you know. Not because of your weapons or your warships, but because of this. This refusal to accept logical limitations. They fear what you might do if pushed too far." The sound of Krillian voices echoed from the main corridor, speaking in their harsh, guttural language. Sarah helped Ilara to her feet, noting that the alien scientist was steadier than she'd appeared through the window. "Good thing we're not planning to push anyone," Sarah said, checking her sidearm and scanning the lab for anything useful they could carry. "We're just going home." But, even as she said the words, Sarah Chen had no idea that her simple act of refusing to abandon a friend would set in motion events that would reshape humanity's relationship with the galaxy. She didn't know that the Krillians had been recording everything, or that their surveillance data would eventually reach the highest levels of the Galactic Council. All she knew was that Ilara Voss was her friend, and humans didn't leave friends behind. Everything else would have to work itself out later. The maintenance bay reeked of coolant and ozone. Emergency lighting cast long shadows between the scattered equipment as Sarah and Ilara made their way toward the ancient shuttle that represented their only hope of escape. Behind them, the sounds of systematic destruction grew louder as Krillian boarding teams worked their way through the station section by section. There, Sarah pointed to a battered craft wedged between two larger cargo haulers. The shuttle's hull was scarred with micrometeorite impacts and patched with mismatched plating, but its engine showed the steady blue glow of an active power core. Ilara limped beside her, one arm draped over Sarah's shoulders for support. The head injury was affecting her balance, though she tried to hide it. "Sarah, I must tell you something about the research we were conducting. The data in my neural implant, it contains information about Krillian bioenhancement programs. If they capture me alive, they won't." Sarah's voice carried absolute certainty as she helped Ilara up the shuttle's boarding ramp. "Besides, you're assuming we won't make it out of here." The shuttle's interior was cramped and functional, designed for short trips between stations and orbital platforms. Sarah strapped Ilara into the co-pilot's seat before settling into the pilot's position. Her fingers danced across controls that were older than she was, systems that predated most of the safety protocols mandated by the Galactic Council. "Navigation computer is 3 generations out of date," Sarah muttered, running through the pre-flight sequence. "Life support is rated for 48 hours maximum. Hyperspace motivator looks like it was installed sometime during the Carter administration." "The Carter administration?" Ilara's voice carried a note of confusion. "Old Earth reference. Point is, this thing is ancient." Sarah began the engine start-up sequence. "But she's got one advantage over modern ships: she was built before the Galactic Council standardized civilian vessel specifications. No mandatory safety limiters, no automatic distress beacons, no emergency shutdown protocols that can be triggered remotely." The shuttle's engine spun up with a whine that suggested several bearings were well past their replacement date. On the main display, Kepler Station's schematic showed multiple hull breaches and a dozen Krillian vessels attached like parasites to its outer ring. Bay doors are sealed, Sarah observed, checking the external sensors. Krillians have locked down all normal exit routes. Ilara studied the tactical display with professional interest. The blast doors are reinforced titanium steel composite. Even our research lasers couldn't cut through them quickly enough to. She stopped mid-sentence as Sarah began redirecting power from life support to the shuttle's antiquated weapon systems. What are you doing? Sarah's smile held no warmth whatsoever. Something the Galactic Council would never approve of. Good thing they're not here to stop me. The shuttle's forward plasma cutter hummed to life, its intensity far exceeding normal civilian specifications. This wasn't a tool designed for precision work, it was a relic from the early days of human space exploration, when asteroid mining meant carving through solid rock with whatever tools were available. Sarah, the energy requirements alone will drain our power reserves down to maybe 20%. Sarah lined up the cutter with the blast door's central locking mechanism. Enough to get us through hyperspace to the mining station, if we're careful. The plasma beam lanced out, white-hot and brilliant against the metallic barrier. Sparks cascaded like fireworks as the cutter began its work, slowly eating through layers of reinforced plating. Alarms began wailing throughout the bay as automated systems detected the unauthorized breach. They know we're here now, Ilara said, watching the tactical display as Krillian biosignatures began converging on their location. Good. Let them come. Sarah adjusted the cutter's focus, concentrating the beam on the door's structural weak points. Maybe they'll learn something about human determination. The blast door shuddered as the first locking bolt failed. Then, the second. On the display, Krillian troops were moving through the adjacent corridors, their heavy weapons trained on the sealed entrances to the maintenance bay. Sarah, if I may ask. Ilara's voice was carefully neutral. What will you do if we encounter Krillian vessels after we escape? This shuttle has minimal defensive capabilities. Same thing I'm doing now. The third locking bolt gave way with a shower of molten metal. Whatever it takes. The bay doors began to separate, revealing the star-scattered darkness of space beyond. Sarah didn't wait for them to open fully, she gunned the engines, sending the shuttle through the gap with barely centimeters to spare on either side. Kepler Station fell away behind them, its hull scarred with blast marks and crawling with Krillian vessels. Sarah pushed the engines to maximum burn, heading for the edge of the system's gravity well where they could safely engage the hyperspace motivator. Contact, Ilara announced, monitoring the rear sensors. 3 Krillian interceptors, bearing down on our position. Sarah glanced at the tactical display. The enemy ships were sleek predators compared to their limping shuttle, built for speed and firepower. In a straight fight, the maintenance craft wouldn't last 30 seconds. Time to hyperspace jump point? 14 minutes at current velocity. And time for the interceptors to reach weapons range? Ilara's pause spoke volumes. 6 minutes. Sarah nodded grimly and began transferring power from every non-essential system to the engines. The shuttle groaned under the increased acceleration, its ancient frame protesting the abuse. There's something else, Ilara said quietly. The data in my neural implant, it's not just research notes. During our investigation of the Krillian biosamples, I discovered something they've been hiding from the Galactic Council. Their enhancement programs aren't just improving their physical capabilities, they're specifically designed to counter human physiology. Sarah's hands tightened on the controls. What do you mean, counter human physiology? The Krillians have been studying captured human soldiers for decades. Their bioenhancements target specific human weaknesses, our slower reflexes, our limited sensory range, our dependence on specific atmospheric compositions. They're literally evolving themselves to be perfect human predators. The first energy blast streaked past the shuttle's hull, close enough to trigger proximity alarms. Sarah threw the craft into an evasive spiral, using every trick she'd learned during her service in the Merchant Marine to stay ahead of the targeting computers. How long until they perfect the process? Sarah asked, rolling inverted to avoid another volley of plasma bolts. Based on their current research trajectory? Maybe 2 years. 3 at the outside. Ilara gripped her restraints as the shuttle shuddered under a near miss. Sarah, if this information reaches human space, there'll be a war. Sarah's voice was flat, matter-of-fact. A real war, not the border skirmishes we've been fighting for the past decade. She pulled the shuttle through a punishing high G-turn, using a debris field from an old mining operation to break the interceptor's targeting lock. The maneuver bought them precious minutes, but the Krillian pilots were adapting to her tactics. The Galactic Council fears human military capability, Ilara continued, her violet eyes fixed on the tactical display. They've spent considerable resources ensuring that humanity never has sufficient justification for full-scale mobilization. But, if they learned about the Krillian enhancement program, the Council would declare it an existential threat to human survival. Sarah nodded grimly. Which it is. And then, every human ship in the galaxy would converge on Krillian space with orders to sterilize every world they control. The hyperspace jump point was finally within range. Sarah began the charging sequence for the motivator, praying that the ancient systems would hold together for one more critical operation. Behind them, the interceptors had cleared the debris field and were closing fast. There's more, Ilara said. The enhancement program isn't random experimentation. They're preparing for a specific operation, something called Iron Harvest. From what I could determine, it involves simultaneous strikes against major human colonies, using enhanced Krillian operatives to infiltrate and disable planetary defense systems. Sarah's blood went cold. When? The data suggests within the next 18 months. They're waiting for the completion of their current enhancement cycle before they begin deployment. The hyperspace motivator reached minimum charge threshold. Not optimal, but it would have to be enough. Sarah locked in the coordinates for the Tau Ceti mining facility and engaged the jump sequence. Jump in 10 seconds, she announced, watching the interceptors close to point-blank range. Ilara, whatever happens, that data has to reach human space. What do you mean, whatever happens? The hyperspace field began to form around their shuttle, reality blurring at the edges as the ancient motivator struggled to tear a hole in normal spacetime. The Krillian interceptors opened fire with everything they had, plasma bolts and particle beams converging on the shuttle's position. Most of the energy discharges struck the hyperspace field and were deflected harmlessly into normal space. But one bolt, fired at precisely the right angle with exactly the right timing, punched through the field's protective barrier and struck the shuttle's starboard engine nacelle. Hull breach in the engine compartment. Ilara's voice was sharp with alarm. We're losing power. The hyperspace field wavered, threatening to collapse entirely and leave them stranded in normal space with 3 hostile ships bearing down on them. Sarah made a decision that would have horrified any rational engineer. She rerouted power from life support and artificial gravity directly into the failing motivator. The field stabilized, and reality twisted around them as they plunged into hyperspace. But Sarah could already see the damage reports flooding her console. Engine containment was failing, life support was operating at minimal levels, and they were losing atmosphere through the hull breach. How long until we reach the mining station? She asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. Ilara's fingers danced over the navigation display. In our current condition? Maybe 6 hours. But, Sarah, with life support functioning at this level, we'll make it. Sarah's voice carried absolute conviction. We have to. That data is too important to lose. She didn't mention that even if they survived the journey to Tau Ceti, they would arrive with barely enough power to maintain life support, let alone send a message to human space. She didn't mention that the mining facility was automated, with no permanent human staff to assist with repairs. She didn't mention any of those things because Ilara was already calculating the odds, and Sarah could see in the alien scientist's violet eyes that she understood exactly how slim their chances had become. But humans didn't make decisions based on odds. They made them based on what was right. And saving the woman who had become more than a friend, while ensuring that critical intelligence reached those who could act on it, that was right, regardless of the cost. The Tau Ceti mining facility hung in the void like a metal spider web, its automated processing arms moving with mechanical precision as they carved apart asteroids and sorted the valuable minerals. Sarah fought to keep the damaged shuttle on approach vector as systems failed one by one around them. Atmospheric breach is accelerating, Ilara reported, her voice tight with controlled panic.
We have maybe 20 minutes of breathable air remaining.
The shuttle shuddered as another power coupling overloaded. Sarah could smell burning insulation and ozone, the acrid scent of a dying spacecraft. Through the forward viewport, the mining station grew larger, but its docking bays remained sealed.
Automated facilities weren't designed to accommodate emergency landings. Can you access the station's docking protocols from here?
Sarah asked, sweat beading on her forehead as she fought to maintain their approach angle with failing thrusters. Ilara's fingers moved across her console, interfacing with the mining station's basic computer systems. The docking bay can be manually overridden, but someone needs to be physically present at the control station.
The facility's maintenance robots aren't programmed for emergency procedures. Sarah stared at the massive facility ahead of them.
The closest docking bay was sealed behind blast doors designed to protect the station's interior from asteroid impacts and cosmic radiation. Even if they could somehow force their way inside, the mining facility's automated systems would probably interpret their presence as a hostile intrusion. There, Ilara pointed to a section of the station's outer ring where several cargo pods were attached to loading mechanisms. The cargo transfer system, it's designed to allow ships to dock without entering the pressurized sections.
If we could align with one of the transfer ports.
The shuttle's too big.
We'd never fit through the cargo interface.
Sarah studied the tactical display, running calculations in her head. But, if we could somehow, she stopped mid-sentence as an idea began to form. It was completely insane, violated every safety protocol in the book, and would probably get them both killed.
Which meant it was exactly the kind of plan that might actually work. Ilara, how much do you weigh? The Altarian scientist blinked in confusion. Approximately 45 kilograms in Earth standard gravity. Why?
Sarah began transferring control of the shuttle's systems to Ilara's console.
Because you're going to pilot this thing for the next few minutes while I do something incredibly stupid. Sarah, what are you planning?
Instead of answering directly, Sarah began stripping components from the shuttle's emergency kit: magnetic grapples, emergency oxygen tanks, a portable cutting torch designed for hull repairs.
The cargo transfer system is automated, right? It responds to standard docking signals? Yes, but, and the emergency beacon in our survival kit transmits on the same frequency band as cargo pod identification transponders?
Ilara's violet eyes widened as she began to understand.
Sarah, you cannot be serious. The risks involved are irrelevant.
Sarah sealed her emergency suit and checked the magnetic anchor points on her utility belt. The data in your neural implant has to reach human space. That means we need to get aboard the station, access the long-range communications array, and transmit everything to the nearest human military installation.
Through the forward viewport, the mining station loomed huge and intimidating.
Its automated systems were already responding to their presence, defensive turrets tracking their approach vector.
In a few minutes, those systems would identify them as unauthorized intruders and respond accordingly.
Keep us on approach vector until I give you the signal, Sarah said, moving toward the shuttle's airlock. Then, break off and try to land in the main docking bay.
The cargo transfer should give me enough time to override the bay doors from inside. And if you miss the transfer port?
Sarah paused at the airlock controls.
Then, you complete the mission without me.
Use the shuttle's communication array to broadcast the data on all human emergency frequencies.
Someone will hear it.
Ilara's expression shifted, something unreadable passing across her delicate features.
Sarah, I need you to understand something.
When I said your species terrifies the Galactic Council, I was not speaking metaphorically. This thing you are doing, this refusal to abandon someone regardless of the cost, it defies every principle of rational behavior that governs civilized space.
Good thing I've never been particularly civilized.
Sarah sealed her helmet and initiated the airlock cycle.
Keep the shuttle steady, Ilara. I'll see you on the other side. The airlock opened to the vast emptiness of space.
Sarah activated her suit's magnetic anchors and launched herself toward the mining station's cargo transfer port, a journey of roughly 200 meters across the void. Behind her, the shuttle maintained its approach, Ilara's skilled piloting keeping them aligned despite the failing engines. The transfer port grew larger as Sarah sailed toward it, her emergency beacon broadcasting the identification code of a standard cargo container. The mining station's automated systems responded exactly as designed, opening the transfer port and extending mechanical arms to guide the incoming cargo into the facility's processing center. Sarah grabbed onto the nearest mechanical arm and allowed it to pull her into the station's interior. The transfer port sealed behind her, and she found herself in a vast cargo bay filled with processed minerals and automated sorting equipment. Emergency lighting cast everything in harsh shadows as she made her way toward the control station. The mining facility's computer systems were ancient but functional, designed for reliability rather than sophistication. Sarah accessed the docking bay controls and began the override sequence, opening the blast doors that would allow Ilara to bring the shuttle inside. "Sarah, are you receiving?" Ilara's voice crackled through the emergency communication channel. "I'm here. Docking bay is opening now. Bring her in quick, I'm showing multiple system failures on your end." Through the cargo bay's observation windows, Sarah watched the battered shuttle limp toward the opening docking bay. Ilara's piloting was masterful despite the failing controls, bringing the craft in at exactly the right angle to avoid the bay's internal structures. The shuttle touched down with a grinding screech of stressed metal against the docking bay floor. Sarah was already running through the station's corridors toward the communications array, knowing that every second counted. The Krillians would have detected their escape from Kepler Station by now, and it wouldn't take them long to trace their hyperspace signature to this location. She reached the communications center as Ilara emerged from the damaged shuttle, moving unsteadily but under her own power. The long-range transmitter was a military-grade installation, designed to reach ships throughout the Tau Ceti system and beyond. "Can you interface your neural implant with the transmitter?" Sarah asked, activating the array's power systems. Ilara nodded and approached the communication console. "The data transfer will take several minutes. Once I begin, the transmission cannot be interrupted without losing everything. Then, we'd better make sure we're not interrupted." Sarah checked her sidearm and moved to the communications center's entrance. Through the station's external sensors, she could see the distinctive energy signatures of ships dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Krillian pursuit vessels, Ilara observed, her hands already interfacing with the transmitter controls. 3 heavy cruisers, minimum. They'll be within weapons range in approximately 15 minutes. Sarah nodded grimly. The mining station's defensive systems were designed to deal with asteroid impacts and equipment malfunctions, not military assault. Once the Krillians arrived, they would have perhaps 10 minutes before the station's hull was breached and their position overrun. "Beginning data transmission," Ilara announced. "Uploading research files, enhancement program specifications, and operational intelligence regarding iron harvest. Transmission time, 12 minutes, 37 seconds. Through the communication array's displays, Sarah could see the data stream flowing outward toward human space. Somewhere in the darkness, human ships would receive Ilara's intelligence and understand the true scope of the Krillian threat. The information would trigger protocols that had been dormant for decades, awakening a military response that would reshape the balance of power in this sector of the galaxy. "The Galactic Council will not approve of what comes next," Ilara said quietly, her violet eyes fixed on the transmission progress indicator. "When humanity learns of the Iron Harvest program, when they understand that the Krillians have been preparing to exterminate human colonies, there'll be consequences," Sarah agreed. "But that's not our problem anymore. Our job was to get the data to where it could do some good." The station shuddered as the first Krillian energy blast struck its outer hull. The defensive screens held, but Sarah could see from the damage displays that they wouldn't last long against military-grade weapons. The mining facility had never been designed to withstand this kind of assault. "Transmission at 70% completion," Ilara reported. "The tactical data is through, along with most of the enhancement program specifications. If we lose the signal now, human command will still have enough information to respond effectively." Another series of impacts rocked the station. Emergency klaxons wailed as hull breaches began to appear in the outer sections. Sarah could see Krillian boarding pods attaching themselves to the station's superstructure, their occupants preparing to cut their way inside. Sarah, Ilara's voice carried a strange note of wonder. I am beginning to understand what makes your species so formidable. It is not your technology or your weapons. It is this willingness to sacrifice everything for a principle that cannot be quantified or calculated. Don't get too philosophical on me yet, Sarah replied, watching the tactical display as Krillian troops began moving through the station's outer corridors. We're not dead yet. The transmission reached 90% completion as the first blast door gave way to Krillian cutting tools. Sarah could hear their harsh voices echoing through the station's corridors, coordinating their search patterns as they hunted for the escaped prisoners. Transmission complete, Ilara announced, stepping back from the communication console. All data has been successfully uploaded to human space. The signal has been received and acknowledged by the military installation at Proxima Centauri. Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Whatever happened next, the mission was accomplished. The data that could save human colonies from the iron harvest was safely in the hands of those who could act on it. Now what? Ilara asked, listening to the sound of approaching footsteps. Sarah checked her weapon one more time and moved to cover the communications center's entrance. Now we find out if the Krillians are as tough as they think they are. The first Krillian trooper rounded the corner at precisely the wrong moment, walking directly into Sarah's line of fire. The second was more cautious, using a photon grenade to blind the human defenders before advancing. But Sarah had fought in the Merchant Marine Security Forces before joining the research station, and she knew how to use cover and movement to offset superior numbers. She kept the Krillians at bay for precious minutes while Ilara worked to destroy the communication logs, ensuring that their enemies wouldn't be able to trace the data transmission back to its recipients. When the defensive position finally became untenable, when overwhelming numbers forced them back into the communications center itself, Sarah and Ilara found themselves faced with a choice that would have been impossible for any other species in the galaxy. Surrender and face interrogation, torture, and eventual death at Krillian hands. Or make one final gesture of defiance that would ensure their captors learned nothing useful from their sacrifice. Sarah looked at Ilara, seeing understanding and acceptance in the alien scientist's violet eyes. They had done what they came to do. The data was safely transmitted. The warning had been delivered. Human space would be ready for what was coming. Any regrets? Sarah asked, her hand moving toward the communications center's emergency destruct control. Ilara's smile was serene, almost peaceful. Only that I waited so long to understand what friendship means to humans. Thank you, Sarah Chen, for not leaving me behind. The Krillian troops burst into the communications center just as Sarah activated the destruct sequence. The explosion was brief but thorough, ensuring that nothing useful would remain for enemy analysis. But 6 months later, when the human fleet arrived at the edge of Krillian space with orders to end the enhancement program permanently, the survivors of that expedition learned something that would have amazed Sarah and Ilara. The emergency beacon in their shuttle had continued transmitting long after the mining station's destruction, sending out a distress signal that was eventually detected by a human patrol cruiser. When the rescue team arrived at the Tau Ceti facility, they found 2 people alive in the shuttle's emergency bunker, injured, unconscious, but breathing. It turned out that Sarah's incredibly stupid plan had included one final backup protocol that she hadn't mentioned to anyone. The shuttle's life support system had been programmed to activate an emergency hibernation sequence if certain conditions were met, preserving the lives of any survivors until rescue arrived. The Galactic Council never did understand what had happened at Kepler Station and the Tau Ceti mining facility. They couldn't comprehend why 2 individuals would risk everything for data that could have been transmitted through normal diplomatic channels eventually. They couldn't grasp the concept of loyalty that transcended rational calculation. But the Krillians understood. After the human fleet finished with their enhancement facilities, after their iron harvest program was reduced to smoking rubble and their military leadership was forced to sign treaties guaranteeing they would never again target human civilians, they understood perfectly. Humans don't abandon their own. They don't calculate acceptable losses when friends are involved. They don't walk away when someone they care about is in danger. And that, more than any weapon or warship, is what makes them the most dangerous species in the galaxy.
Because when you threaten their people, humans don't just fight back. They come for you. All of them. And they don't stop until the threat is eliminated permanently.
That's the lesson the galaxy learned from the day they left her behind, and the humans refused to walk away.